participants. Today, I, Animan Sharma, welcome you all to the 23rd session of the 100 lecture series convened by the Capacity Building Center of Cotton University. I now request Sri Diganta Biswa Sarma sir to continue his lecture on today's topic.
Namaskar. We are discussing plans of consciousness, and we have discussed that there are 5 plans of consciousness according to Indian psychology or Indian spirituality or Indian physiopsychology of yoga. And they are our surface working consciousness. Another one is above our working consciousness, there is a superconscient, and below our surface consciousness, there is a subconsciousness. And even below subconscient, there is a plan, there is a range of consciousness which is called inconscient. It is inconscient, but it is not void of consciousness. These things will be discussed in great detail. And the last one is subliminal consciousness. Subliminal, that is behind the surface consciousness. Subconscient is below the working consciousness, while subliminal is the consciousness which lies behind the working consciousness. So these plans of consciousness, as well as parts of being, psychological anatomy of our being, will be discussed in 2 ways in due course. One is horizontally and one is vertically. When we will be discussing vertically, it will be superconscient, superconscient, then surface consciousness, and below surface consciousness, there is subconscient and inconscient. But when it will be discussed horizontally, then it is the surface consciousness, and behind surface consciousness, we have the subliminal consciousness. Subliminal consciousness. In Indian terminology, it is called Odhisatana. Superconscient is the Odhisatana. Vajja Satana, that is to say, the surface working consciousness is called Jagrata Satana. And subconscient, it is very popular word, it is Oboseton Mon. And inconscient is called Nisatana. But it is not void of consciousness. So all these plans will be discussed, though we are discussing, it will be taken up one by one, and it will be discussed in a great detail, along with our psychological parts of being. As in physiology, we have physiological parts of being. So in psychology, we have our psychological parts of being. And right now, today, this subliminal consciousness is also called inner consciousness. So subliminal, you can understand as inner consciousness. Inner consciousness. So today, I will be taking up 3 distinct things. One is what is called inner consciousness and what is called outer consciousness. We will be discussing to a certain extent, but these things will be taken up again in a great detail. Today, just the introductory. Today, it will be only introductory discussion. So what is outer being and inner being, and what is inner consciousness and outer consciousness, that is to say surface consciousness. And though it is not exactly subliminal, but subliminal is an inner consciousness. So what is inner consciousness? Number 1. And number 2, Sri Aurobindo has again talked of another category of consciousness, but it is not plans of consciousness. It is not a range of consciousness or plan of consciousness, but a class of consciousness. And he termed it as environmental consciousness. Environmental consciousness. What is this environmental consciousness? Or we can explain it in our Indian term as পৰিবেশগত. আমি পৰিবেশগত আমাৰ চেতনা বুলিও ক'ব পাৰো, but it is not a plan of consciousness. but it's a class of consciousness. So what is environmental consciousness? That will be taken up. And the third aspect, normally our surface consciousness, that is to say our outer being is composed of three parts. Outer being is basically composed of three parts. One is, we know, mind. Another one is called physical. আৰু অসমীয়াত যেতিয়া আমি কওঁ তিনিটা, শৰীৰ, প্ৰাণ আৰু মন. We know what is mind. We know what is physical. But what is pran? What is pran? But popularly we speak of sharir, pran, mon. But what is then this pran? Is it identical with mind, or it is something different from mind? It is a different element from mind. So popularly we say our outer being is composed of three parts: mind, prana, and sharira. Sharira is physical, mind is mono, but what is prana? Maharishi uses a specific term for this prana in English. When he speaks about this prana in English, he uses the word vital, vital, vital. I have explained a little bit about this vital, and we will be discussing about vital consciousness in due course of time. But today I shall be discussing to a certain extent what this vital is all about. What this vital is all about. Because we have an obscure idea of mind. What is mind? We have an obscure idea. Amar eta osposto dharana ase what is mind and what is our physical, amar shorir ki. We have an obscure idea. But what is this prana? আমি সকলোবোৰে মনৰ বুলি কওঁ, মোৰ মনৰ ইচ্ছা হৈছে। যদি সকলোবোৰ কথা, if it is related to mind, then mind is consisting of what then? How then is the prana is composed of? What is this prana? Sharir, mon, pran. So this prana, that is to say vital, will be taken up and will be discussed to a certain extent only. It will be taken up in a great detail in due course of time. So let us first take up the outer being and the inner being, or the outer being, inner being, and consciousness. So first, there are always two different consciousness in the human being. So we possess two kinds of consciousness. One is called outward, in which we live. 99% we are influenced, we are guided, we are motivated by this outward consciousness. Most men are influenced by this outward consciousness. And the other one is called the inward consciousness or inner consciousness. So the characteristics of first consciousness, that is to say outward consciousness, is that we live in that consciousness. Normally, generally, we live in that consciousness. The consciousness in which we live is called outward consciousness, or walking consciousness, surface walking consciousness. Surface walking consciousness, we can say surface walking consciousness or outward consciousness. So in which we live. So first characteristics or definition of outward consciousness: the outward consciousness, it is that consciousness in which we live. We live ordinarily. And the other one is called inward consciousness, which is concealed. So this is the first characteristics of inner consciousness, which is concealed, which is veiled, that needs to be unveiled. The process is called sadhana. Spirituality is not Spirituality is not ethics. Spirituality is not morality. Spirituality is not high intellectuality. So spirituality is moving inward, turning inward to realize that inward consciousness, inner consciousness. So, of which we know nothing, of which man knows nothing. So these are the preliminary two characteristics of this inner consciousness. Inner consciousness, which is concealed, number one. And number two, about which man does not, man knows nothing. Man knows nothing. In his outward consciousness, we know nothing about this inner consciousness. But when we can know about inner consciousness, how we can be influenced by inner consciousness? Is there any discipline to realize that inner consciousness? Is there any process to turn inward? In India, we have thousands of disciplines, not one, not two, not three. We have thousands of disciplines. You can pursue anyone according to your Swabhava and Sadharma. Swabhava, that is to say, law of law of your law of your being, Swabhava, law of your being, and Sadharma means law of your nature. And this is the great distinction of the Bhagavad Gita. So what type of work we need to undertake, we need to pursue, which suits my Swabhava and Sadharma, because it is divine mandate, Swabhava and Sadharma. So you can pursue any one of that discipline if you want to realize your inner consciousness. There is discipline in India. And those disciplines are called sadhana. In Indian words, it is called sadhana. So when one does sadhana, if you ask me about the sadhana, I am not in a position to explain about the processes of those thousands disciplines. If you are interested, you have to pursue yourself. But India is a land of spiritual democracy. India has given you, if nothing, at least India has given you the full spiritual liberty. You can pursue according to your own Swabhava and Sadharma. The inner consciousness, then what happens when you do sadhana? Then inner consciousness begins to open. If you do not want to open your inner consciousness, it is up to your wisdom. Whether you will open your inner consciousness or not, it's up to you. You can be satisfied with your limited outward consciousness. Nobody will be imposing on you that you have to undergo sadhana. You have to pursue a particular form or particular discipline to open your inner consciousness. Nobody will be imposing on you. It's up to you. So when one does sadhana, the inner consciousness begins to open. So it is not entirely out of reach of humanity. It is within reach of humanity. But there is a condition. And what is that condition? You have to do sadhana if you want to open your inner consciousness. And what will happen if you do not open your inner consciousness? You will be limited. You will be a limited man. You will be limited by your outward consciousness. You can be satisfied. You can be content with your limited consciousness. No problem. And one is able to go inside. So there is disciplines. You can go inside of your being. You can open your inner consciousness. You have to do sadhana. But I cannot explain the exact processes involved in those 1000 sadhana. It could be more also. You can take up any sadhana and have all kinds of experiences there. As we are experiencing in our outward consciousness, we can experience different experiences of our inner consciousness if we open our inner consciousness by pursuing sadhana. Then we will be able to go inside of our being. We will be able to open our inner consciousness, which is right now concealed, and right now we knows nothing about my inner consciousness. And as the sadhana progresses, what happens? One begins to live more and more in this inner being. You will be abandoning your outward consciousness. If you do sadhana, as the sadhana progresses, you will be living more and more in inner consciousness. More and more inner consciousness. And then what will happen? Right now for you, your outward consciousness is that consciousness in which you live. When you will be realizing or opening up your inner consciousness, and you will be living in that consciousness, that inner consciousness, then what happens? Then outer becomes more and more superficial. Then you will find yourself. It is not an intellectual understanding. These things are subject matter of experiences. So if you do sadhana, is your own laboratory. You cannot share in spiritual laboratory. Your spiritual laboratory cannot be shared with anybody. It is your personal laboratory. So one begins to live more and more as the sadhana progresses. One begins to live more and more in this inner being, and the outer becomes more and more superficial. Outer becomes more and more superficial. You will begin to realize that my inner consciousness actually my real consciousness. This outward consciousness is delusion. You will feel like that. So at first means when you are living in outward consciousness. The inner consciousness seems to be the dream, and the outer the walking reality. Why it seems to be dream? Because as we are told earlier, the subliminal is the great dream builder. The source of our dreams are in the subliminal consciousness. For us, inner consciousness seems to be the dream. And what then outward consciousness for me? Outward consciousness is for me reality. Right now, inner consciousness is for me dream. And outward consciousness, surface consciousness is for me a great reality. But afterwards, what will happen? Afterwards, the inner consciousness becomes the reality. Vice versa. When you will take up sadhana, when you will do sadhana, then the inner consciousness becomes the reality, and the outer is felt by many. Not necessarily all will have to be felt, all will feel. Because spiritual laboratory, your experience will be specific to you only. The experiences, what you are experiencing, I may not be experiencing those things by pursuing same sadhana. It may be different for different individual. Experiences vary from person to person. So afterwards, the inner consciousness becomes the reality, and the outer is felt by many as a dream or delusion. Even it seems to you that my outer consciousness is nothing but a delusion. It's a dream. And what is real consciousness? My inner consciousness is the real consciousness. But for that, sadhana has to progress. So it is a progressive realization. It is a progressive realization, not intellectual realization, not intellectual understanding. Nothing to do with your brain. Nothing to do with your brain. And else as something superficial and external. So as sadhana progresses, inner consciousness may seem to you as the real consciousness. And the outer is felt by many as a dream or delusion or as something superficial and external to yourself, as if it is not my consciousness. You will feel like that. So 4 things have been spoken of. What will happen then? You may feel outward consciousness as dream, as delusion, as something superficial, as something external to you. These are the outcomes of inward sadhana. And the inner consciousness begins to be a place of, then inner consciousness begins to be a place of what? Begins to be a place of deep peace, gobhir prahanti, light, pohor, aluk, juti, happiness, love, closeness to the divine, and the presence of the divine, that is to say the mother, Dibba Janani. So these things starts happening when you do sadhana. As the sadhana progresses, these things starts happening. These things start happening. So then we then are aware of 2 consciousness. One is then, so we are then aware of 2 consciousness, this inner one, just we have spoken about it, and the outer, which has to be changed into its counterpart and instrument. So my outward consciousness has to be changed. Changed as what? Changed as counterpart and instrument of what? Of my inner consciousness. So my mind has to function after sadhana. My mind has to act as an instrument of my inner consciousness. My vital has to act as an instrument of my inner consciousness. My physical has to act at the behest of my inner consciousness. And this is what is called transformation of outward consciousness. Into what? Into inner consciousness. That also must become full of peace, light, union with the divine. So my outward consciousness, like inner consciousness, becoming deep peace, light, happiness, love, closeness to the divine or the presence of the divine. In the same manner, outward consciousness has to be a place of peace, light, union with the divine. But what would be the process? The process would be to change this outward consciousness into inner consciousness. And changing it into inner consciousness means making outward consciousness as instrument of inner consciousness. Turning outward consciousness, that is to say, turning your mind, vital and physical. You have to make them instrument and counterpart of your inner consciousness. And then what will happen? Then your outward consciousness will also become a place of full peace, light, union with the divine. But now we are moving between the two. In reality, now we are moving between the two, between these two kinds of consciousness, inner consciousness and the outward consciousness. We are moving between the two. Mostly we are influenced by outward consciousness, but whenever inner gets any opportunity, it starts influencing. Otherwise, we would not have poets. Otherwise, we would not have artists. Otherwise, we would not have lyricists, we would not have singers. So at present, you are moving between the two. At present, you are moving between the two. Two means the inner and the outward consciousness. And in this period, all the feelings you have are quite natural. Actually, these are answers to specific questions put by Maharishi's disciples. So in this period, all the feelings you have are quite natural. So you need not be at all anxious about that. So the disciple must be asking about certain experiences he was undergoing, whether that experiences are natural or not. And Maharishi replies, yes, at present, as you are moving between the two, and in this period, all the feelings you have are quite natural. It is nothing unnatural. It is natural. But wait for the full development of the inner consciousness. As you are in the process of sadhana, you have to wait. You have to have patience. You have to have endurance. Then what will happen? But wait for the full development of the inner consciousness in which you will be able to live. Then you would not be moving between the two. So this double nature in human beings, what they are then. So this is always a double nature in human beings, as we have spoken just a while ago. The inner, which is in touch with the divine. So the basic difference, our inner consciousness is in touch with the divine. Outward consciousness is not in touch with the divine. The inner consciousness is touched with the divine. And again, this inner consciousness can be interpreted as our psychic consciousness and spiritual consciousness. What is this psychic consciousness? And what is this spiritual consciousness? I will be taking up two specific terms. One is called Satya Purush, psychic being, and the other one is called Jivatma. Jivatma আমি যিসকলে অলপ অলপ শুনিছো আমি যে কওঁ মানুহ ভগৱানৰ অংশ জীৱাত্মা কিন্তু তাৰ সমানে সমানে আমি আৰু এটা শব্দ শুনিছো অন্তৰাত্মা বুলি আমি কওঁ এই মহাৰিষিৰ ভাষাত এই অন্তৰাত্মাটোহে মাই ইন্ডিভিজুৱেল সোল জীৱাত্মা একচুৱেলি ইট ইজ কমন টু অল যেনেকৈ আমাক ইয়াত মহাপুৰুষ শংকৰদেৱে কৈছে আমাৰ কুকুৰ শৃগালৰো সকলোৰে আত্মা একেই but our individual soul এটাও আমাৰ আছে which is specific to me alone আৰু মহাৰুকিয়ে সেইটো টাৰ্ম কৰিছে অন্তৰাত্মা বুলি আমাৰ উপনিষদতো তাক ভিন ভিন নামেৰে বুজাইছে শ্ৰী অৰবিন্দই তাক ইংৰাজীত নামকৰণ কৰিছে as psychic being psychic শব্দটোৰে ইংৰাজীত দৰাচলতে inner বুজাই psychic means inner in English so Mahariki has used this specific terminology to point out our individual soul, my individual soul. So it is called psychic being. So inner consciousness generates from that psychic. Also, inner consciousness means spiritual consciousness. That is to say, the consciousness of my Jivatma. Jivatma is my central being. For these things will be taken up when I will be taking up our parts of being. There are lots of parts as physiology. we have psychological parts. So far, we are unaware of. As animal does not know anything about his own life, own physiology, we know about our physiology, but we do not know about our psychological parts. And the inner, which is in touch with the divine, and the outer, now he explains what is outer. Outer, that is to say, mental consciousness, vital consciousness, physical consciousness. Mental consciousness, physical consciousness, vital consciousness. Vital consciousness means pranic cetana. আমি অসমীয়াত আমি ব্যৱহাৰ কৰি থাকো, আমি অসমীয়াত ব্যৱহাৰ কৰি থাকো মন প্ৰাণ শৰীৰ, মন প্ৰাণ শৰীৰ, কিন্তু এই প্ৰাণটোৰ বিষয়ে আমি বহুত কথা নাজানো। মই আজি অলপমান আপোনালোকৰ আগত কম, আগতো মই কৈছো প্ৰাণৰ বিষয়ে। আমি সকলোকে মন আৰু প্ৰাণক একাকাৰ কৰি দিওঁ, একাকাৰ কৰি দিওঁ, কিন্তু মনৰ কাম বেলেগ, মন এটা বেলেগ এলিমেন্ট, প্ৰাণ এটা বেলেগ এলিমেন্ট, শৰীৰ এটা বেলেগ element. The outer, that is to say mental, vital and physical, which has been brought up in ignorance. So what is the difference between inner and outward consciousness? Outward consciousness is in touch with the divine, inner consciousness. But the outward consciousness has been brought up. Amar kot protipalito hoise in ignorance, obiddar majat. Ignorance is not lack of knowledge. Ignorance is knowledge about the world, knowledge about objectivity, and knowledge is the knowledge of consciousness. These things will be taken up. What is called ignorance? Ignorance is not lack of knowledge. Ignorance means knowledge of external world, avidya. Avidya is not lack of knowledge. Avidya is a different kind of knowledge. Vidya is a different kind of knowledge. So knowledge about objectivity and knowledge about subjectivity. Knowledge about objectivity is what is called ignorance, and knowledge about subjectivity, what is called knowledge, what is called vidya. So in Indian knowledge system, these two words are very crucial, vidya and avidya. So as my inner consciousness is in touch with divine, the outer has been brought up in ignorance. Dangor dighol kod hoise amar bajya chetonatu avidyar majot, in objectivity, in externality. And another characteristic is full of defects, imperfection and impurities. You can challenge, you can disagree, that is up to your wisdom. গীতাত একেবাৰে 18 নম্বৰ অধ্যায়ৰ গীতাই মানুহক যেটো আধ্যাত্মিক স্বাধীনতা দিছে, পৃথিৱীৰ কোনো প্ৰান্তৰ কোনো ধৰ্মই দিয়া নাই। গীতাই 18 নম্বৰ অধ্যায়ৰ 66 নম্বৰ শ্লোকত একেবাৰে 18টা অধ্যায় অৰ্জুনৰ ওচৰত অভিব্যক্ত কৰাৰ পিছত অৰ্জুনক কৈছে, বোপাই তুমি এটা কি কৰিবা? What you will do now? Will you listen to me or what you will do? কৃষ্ণই অৰ্জুনক বাধ্য কৰোৱা নাই। অৰ্জুনক কৈছে যথেচ্ছি তথা কুৰু, যথেচ্ছি তথা কুৰু, যথা ইচ্ছা তথা কুৰু। তুমি তোমাৰ বিবেক, তোমাৰ মন, তোমাৰ চেতনা ব্যৱহাৰ কৰি কৈছে যথেচ্ছি তথা কুৰু। This is the difference between religion and spirituality. Religion does not give you freedom, but spirituality gives you the freedom. So whether outward consciousness is imperfect or not, these are the result of their experiences. If anybody challenges, no, my outward consciousness is pure, perfect and right, I will not challenge him. Yes, if you think so, it is your right. Continue with your consciousness. But let me have my own idea. I am allowing you to have your own idea, but you have to allow me to have my own idea. So, so two basic differences between inner and outward consciousness. Inner consciousness is in touch with the divine, while outward consciousness, that is to say mental consciousness, vital consciousness, and physical consciousness, are brought up in ignorance. And they are defectives. They are full of defects, imperfections, and impurities. So it is for this reason that in sadhana, these things cannot be changed in a moment, like A plus B whole square formula, like your intellectuality, like your morality, like your intellectualism. Because it is a matter of consciousness. Consciousness cannot be changed intellectually. Consciousness cannot be changed with rational understanding of something. There are lots of things. So, outward consciousness cannot be changed into instrument or counterpart of inner consciousness in a moment, because they are full of defects, imperfection, and impurities. It takes time. Somebody may take 1 hour, somebody may take 10 years, somebody may take 10 lives, somebody may take 1,000 years lives. So the inner experiences, why? Because inner experiences cannot be acquired. This is not something to be acquired. Why? Because this consciousness grows. It is something related to growth, not to be acquired from outside like money. So inner consciousness cannot be seized, cannot be realized. Like acquiring money from outside, or like understanding A plus B whole square formula. It's a process. You have to undergo a process. So because they are full of defects, imperfection, and impurities. So it is for this reason that in sadhana, things cannot be changed in a moment, because the inner experiences grows and extends. It cannot be evoked directly from something. So it has to grow, it has to extend, and feels more and more of the nature. So the process is the inner consciousness has to feel the nature. Nature means our outward nature. But till all is filled, all has to be filled. All the portion of the nature has to be filled up. But till then, the imperfection remains somewhere. It will remain until inner consciousness feels the whole of my nature. So that is why in sadhana, you have to wait, you have to have patience, you have to have endurance. So now let us take up environmental consciousness. Western psychology knows nothing about all this class of consciousness. Only India knows. So everyone carries around him an environmental consciousness or atmosphere. Whatever Maharishi says, he does not say from his intellectuality. These are not his intellectual thesis, intellectual essays. These are intellectual expression of his own experiences. Intellectual expression of his own experiences. So everyone carries around him an environmental or atmosphere through which he is in relation with others or with the universal forces. Because my mental consciousness is specific to me. My vital consciousness is specific to me. And these mind, vital, these are nothing but instrument. How I can contact with universal forces, how I can contact with others. Through environmental consciousness, we are in relation with others. We are in relation with the universal forces. So this is the first necessity of our environmental consciousness. It is through these that these forces or the thoughts or feelings of others enter. So how thoughts of others enter into you? Maharishi says it is through environmental consciousness. So how universal forces enter into your being? The universal forces enter into your being through this environmental consciousness. We will be, what is this environmental consciousness? It will be explained. Or the, because thoughts or feelings enter from outside, enter into my being from outside. আপনি যদি চকুটো মুজে এই মুহূৰ্ততে যদি চকুটো মুজে আপুনি দেখা পাব এই মুহূৰ্তত আপুনি মোৰ কথা শুনি আছে বেলেগ কথা আপোনাৰ কোনো আপোনাৰ চেতনাত যোৱা নাই কিন্তু এই মুহূৰ্ততে আপুনি চকুটো মুজক আপোনাৰ এই মনটো আমেৰিকাত গৈছে এই মনটো আপোনাৰ লৰালিৰ স্কুলত গৈছে মুহূৰ্তৰ ভিতৰতে থাউজেন্ডস থিংস আপুনি দেখা পাব আপুনি এক্সপেৰিয়েন্স কৰিব চকুটো মুজাৰ লগে লগে আৰু তাৰ পিছত আপোনাৰ ৰিয়েলাইজেচন হ'ব আপুনি দেখা পাব হাৰি মোৰ ভিতৰতটো চিন্তাবোৰ বাহিৰৰ পৰা আহে সব চিন্তা মোৰ ভিতৰতটো জেনাৰেট হোৱা নাই এতিয়াও সব চিন্তা বাহিৰৰ পৰা আহে এইভাবে কৈছে it is through these that these forces means these universal forces or the thoughts or feelings of others enter into me through what? Through this environmental consciousness. So this environmental is not a world. It is an individual thing. My environmental consciousness is individual to me alone. It is not about geography. So the environmental is not a world. Then what it is? It is an individual thing. And then he says the individual is not limited to physical body. We will eventually come to what is environmental consciousness. You have to have patience. So the individual is not limited to the physical body. But what is our common idea? What is our common experiences? As if I am limited to my individual body. Why it is so? Because my external consciousness feels like that. Because my external consciousness feels like that. But in reality, I am not limited to my body alone. Why I feel like that? Because my external consciousness feels like that. Feels like that means I am limited to my body only. But in reality, in experience, when you will do sadhana, you will feel, you will realize, you will experience that you are not limited to your body alone. But right now we feel like that because for my external consciousness feels like that. This is the first point to be noted. Then as soon as one gets over this feeling of limitation, আমি যেতিয়া এই সীমাবদ্ধতাটো অতিক্ৰম কৰোঁ, getting over this feeling of limitation. By what? By the process of sadhana. By pursuing a specific discipline of sadhana. Through my aspiration, through my will. One can feel first the inner consciousness. What happens then? You will begin to feel your inner consciousness. When you will do sadhana. Sadhana means turning your consciousness inward. Turning your consciousness inward, which is connected with the body. Rather, inner consciousness is connected to my body. But I am not limited to my external consciousness. Or I am not limited to my physical body. Rather, my inner consciousness is connected to my body. But I am not limited to my body. And why I feel like that? Because my external consciousness feels like that. But in reality, when I will feel inner consciousness after pursuing the sadhana, then what I will find, that inner consciousness is rather connected with the body but does not belong to it. It is connected to my body. My inner consciousness is connected to my body, but it does not belong to my body. So these are two things. My inner consciousness is connected to my body is one thing, but even though inner consciousness does not belong to my body, it is an inner consciousness. It is a reality inherent in the existence. Consciousness is consciousness, but does not belong to it. So what is the first result of your sadhana? First result of your sadhana is you will feel inner consciousness. Second result, you will find that inner consciousness is connected to your body. The third thing you will find, even though inner consciousness is connected to your body, inner consciousness does not belong to it. Does not belong to it. Number fourth thing, what you will find when you will be pursuing the process of sadhana, the plans of consciousness above the mind. That is to say, the superconscious. And also a consciousness surrounding the body. So these are the outcomes of your sadhana. First thing, you will feel inner consciousness. Second thing, you will find that your inner consciousness is connected to your body. Third thing, even though it is connected to your body, it does not belong to it. Inner consciousness does not belong to it. The next thing you will feel, what you will feel? The plans of consciousness above mind. Though now I am speaking only one word, that the plans of consciousness. Why it is written in plural numbers, plans of consciousness? Because above mind, first I will realize higher mind. Above higher mind, I will realize illumined mind. Above illumined mind, I will realize intuitive mind. Above intuitive mind, I will realize overmind. And above overmind, there is the supramental. And that is why those plans of consciousness I will begin to feel, or I will begin to find, or I will begin to realize, or begin to feel. When I will pursue the process of sadhana. And also a consciousness surrounding my body. So it cannot be made, I cannot make you understand intellectually. Intellectually, it can only be communicated to you. This information can be supplied to you, that you will also find a consciousness. You will feel a consciousness surrounding your body. Surrounding your body. Not only planes of consciousness above your mind, not only inner consciousness being connected to your body, not only inner consciousness does not belong to it, even though it is connected to your body, but you will also feel the consciousness surrounding your body. Surrounding your body. Surrounding your body. But still part of yourself. You will find that. Though the consciousness, what you will find or feel or realize that there is a consciousness which is surrounding your body. And you will feel that consciousness, not something outside your body. You will feel a part of yourself, part of oneself, part of the individual being. This environmental consciousness, which is surrounding you, through which one is in contact with the cosmic forces and with other beings. This last is what I have called the environmental consciousness. What a beautiful explanation, Maharishi, in his own way. So this is what is called environmental consciousness, which is surrounding your body. Either you have to believe in what Maharishi has spoken, or you have to undergo a process of sadhana yourself, or you have to reject it. But nobody can make you understand intellectually. Intellectually, it cannot be proved because these are subjective signs. This has to be experienced individually. So let us, we will be discussing many things about environmental consciousness. Tomorrow, the remaining portion I'll be taking up tomorrow. But now let me speak few things about vital, what is called vital. I will be taking up again the remaining portions of the environmental consciousness. So, what is vital? What is this pran? আমি কৈ থাকো প্ৰাণ, মোৰ এইটো প্ৰাণৰ বস্তু, মোৰ এইটো মনৰ বস্তু, কিন্তু আমি সাধাৰণতে মন আৰু প্ৰাণৰ বস্তু একাকাৰ কৰি পেলাও। আমি তিনটা কথা কৈ থাকো, শৰীৰ মন প্ৰাণ, শৰীৰ মন প্ৰাণ, শৰীৰ মন প্ৰাণ, কিন্তু আমি ইংৰাজীত ট্ৰান্সলেশ্যন কৰিবলৈ হলে প্ৰাণৰ কি আমি ইকুইভেলেন্ট ওয়ার্ড দিম। মহারিষি ইকুইভেলেন্ট ওয়ার্ডটো দিছে ভাইটেল, VITAL, vital. Vital is pran. So what is vital? I will be speaking about right now three things, but it will be again taken up in great detail because it is very difficult, very difficult. So the first thing I want to explain that the vital is the life nature. Amar jibanor prakriti, vital. Pran is the prakriti. Pran is the vital life nature. First thing. Then, so it is nature. It is consciousness. Vital is consciousness as well as vital is nature. But composed of what? Vital is composed of your desires, your sensations, your feelings, your passions. First element. How this vital is composed of? How this prana is composed of? Prana is composed of desires, sensations, feelings, passions. First element. Second element, energies of action. So pran is also energy, not only nature. Pran is also energy. That is why we call pran shakti. Pran is also energy. So energy of action. It is also prana is composed of desire as well as prana is will of desire. Will of desire. Amar bahonar সংকল্প, will of desire. Not only will of desire, it is reactions of the desire soul in man. কামাত্মা বুলি কৈছে আমাৰ ভিতৰত যেটো কাম পুৰুষ আছে কামাত্মা আমি সেইবিলাকো আলোচনা কৰিম there is a desire soul in us কাম পুৰুষ কৈছে so when desire soul reacts I can call it vital reacts because these reactions of the desire soul in man is one of the elements with which this vital is composed of. So it is one part how vital is composed of. Reactions of the desire soul in man, will of desire, energies of action, and desires, sensation, feelings, passions. Then all that play of possessive and other related instincts. Adhikar, adhipatya, bijoy. Adhikar, adhipatya, bijoy. These are all elements of our prana. Adhikar, adhipatya, bijoy. Adhikar, adhipatya, bijoy. These are all things. The domination, possession, and conquest. Domination, possession, conquest. These are the prana is composed of your instinct of domination, instinct of domination, then conquest, possession. So, and all that play of possessive and other related instincts. So, what are those? That is to say, your anger, your fear, your greed, your lust, etc. So, with human anger, so all these source of anger, mind cannot express anger. Anger is generated in our prana. Greed is generated in prana. Lust is generated in prana, not in mind, not in sharira. So psychology is nothing but self-knowledge. Modern science does not know all these things because they have not yet cared to study all these things. So this anger, fear, greed, lust, etc., that belongs to this field of the nature. So I think now you have an idea of prana. So second explanation. So because Maharishi had to explain all these things in number of occasions, and so we have to take up many quotations quoted by him in different occasions. The vital as the desire soul and desire nature. You can even call what is vital? Vital is my desire soul. Vital is my desire nature. And what it does as your desire soul and desire nature, it controls my consciousness to a large extent. Mind does not control us to a large extent. In most men, a poet may be influenced by mind to a large extent. But in most men, we are not being guided by our mind. We are being guided, influenced, motivated by our prana, by our vital, the most dangerous element to deal with. The most dangerous because it is energy as well as it is nature. It is a Shakti as well as a Prakriti because it is the life energy. So the vital as the desire soul and desire nature controls the consciousness to a large extent in most men. Why? Why it controls my consciousness to a large extent? Because we are governed by desires. We are not governed by our will. We are not governed by our aspiration. We are not governed by our imagination. Mostly man is governed by his desires. And because of this governance, desire soul and desire nature controls our consciousness to a large extent. And the third, Maharishi, now here he says, it means prana. That is to say, vital means prana. What is this? He now says, it is the life force and desire force in a man. Pran Shakti as well as Vasana Shakti, Kamana Shakti. With all those instincts, anger, greed, lust. So it is the life force and desire force in a man. And the part of being, it is that part of being which responds to desire. So vital responds to our desire. Pran responds to our desire. So the part of being that responds to desire is the most and is the instrument of the life forces, as well as prana is the instrument of whom? Of our life force. Amar jiboni shaktir iata jantrau. Gotike prakritiu, jantrau, shaktiu, the most difficult psychological part to deal with. Mind is not that difficult to deal with. It is easier to deal with mind than to deal with vital, than to deal with prana. It's the most dangerous part in man. And that is why Gita has spoken throughout against desire. You have to renounce your desire. But you are confused. If I renounce desire, what I will have to do? What I will do then? Then human life is meaningless then. If I have to abandon desires, because there is a process of transformation. As Jyoti Prasad said, Rupantar he matu jagat dhuniya kore, ei mur gayatri mantra, he en matu. So, to what and how desires can be transformed? Ambition has to be transformed into will. Desire has to be transformed into yearning. Eagerness has to be transformed into aspiration. Because aspiration is something greater than eagerness. Though it seems to be similar thing, but aspiration is higher and purer will. Ambition is inferior thing. Will is greater than ambition. You have to abandon ambition and you have to generate willpower, not ambition. Ambition has to be abandoned or ambition has to be transformed into will. Desire has to be transformed into yearning. And what is the difference between yearning and desire? If my desire is not satisfied, if desire is not fulfilled, I become angry. But yearning is called dhauti. In Assamese, it's a very, very good word, dhauti. Dhauti has nothing to do with anger. Dhauti has nothing to do with success and failure. So desire has to be transformed into yearning. Eagerness has to be transformed into aspiration. Ambition has to be transformed into will. So with this, let me conclude here. If you want to interact, we can interact for a few. Thank you and namaskar to all. If you want to discuss anything, you can discuss. Yes, if anybody wants, he can speak. He can ask. He or she can ask. Any confusion, you can ask if you want to interact.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
মই জাগেট ক্লোজৰ প্ৰিন্সিপালে কৈছো।
হয় কওক।
আপোনাৰ গোটেইটা চেচন মই এটেণ্ড কৰিব পৰা নাই, দুখিত। কিন্তু যিকেইটা শুনিছো মই আপুনি আমাক নিজকে বহুত বেলেগ ধৰণে চাবলৈ শিকাইছে।
ধন্যবাদ।
প্ৰথম কথা বহুত বস্তু আমি চিনি পোৱা নাছিলোঁ বা জনাই নাছিলোঁ
হয় হয়
বা বস্তু বুজি পোৱা নাছিলোঁ। আপোনাৰ আজি ছেশ্যনটো অলমষ্ট মই 20 মিনিট দেৰিকৈ সোমাইছোঁ, কিন্তু পিছৰ যিখিনি কথা শুনিছোঁ
হয়
মোৰ মানে গানো শিয়ৰি গৈছে কথাবোৰ শুনি তাৰমানে।
ধন্যবাদ
কিন্তু
ধন্যবাদ।
আমি আচলতে বহুত কথা জনাই নাই। আমি মানে মই শিক্ষক হিচাপে ধৰক বহুত দিন কাম কৰিলোঁ, অধ্যক্ষ হিচাপে কাম কৰিছোঁ বহুত বছৰ, 10 বছৰমান। তাৰ মাজত কামৰ ব্যস্ততাৰ মাজত আচলতে জীৱনটোক শিকিবলৈ চেষ্টাই কৰা নাই। আমি আচলতে যিবোৰ পাই গৈ আছোঁ তাৰ মাজেদি আমি জীৱনটোক বুজি আছিলোঁ। কিন্তু ইমান ওপৰলৈ যে তেখেতে মানে মহাৰিষিয়ে, সঁচাকৈ আপুনি মহাৰিষি শব্দটো
Yes.
ইমান ধুনীয়াকৈ কৈছে, তেখেতে ইমান দকে গোটেই বস্তুবোৰ চিন্তা কৰিছে। আমাৰ মাইণ্ড, ছুপাৰ মাইণ্ড আপোনাৰ ইমান পৰ্যায়লৈ লৈ গৈছেগৈ। সঁচাকৈ ভাবিব লগা কথা। আপুনি আৰু এটা ছেশ্যনত কৈছিলে যে আমি টাচ কৰোঁ, যে আমি ফিল কৰোঁ। এই ফিল কৰা কামটো আমি আচলতে আমাৰ স্কিনে কৰে। আমি গম নাপাওঁ আচলতে স্কিনে কৰে, আমাৰ মাইণ্ডে কৰে ফিলিংছটো।
মনে
আমাৰ
কৰে
মাইণ্ড মনে কৰে হয়। আপুনি কৈছিলে যে
Skin is the instrument. Eye is the
মই সেইদিনা
instrument.
হয়, যেতিয়া মেণ্টেল পেচেণ্ট এজন যেতিয়া মানে তেখেত ধৰক এতিয়া আমি ৰাস্তাত ঘূৰি ফুৰা পাগল বুলি কওঁ যিবোৰ ধৰক,
হয়
তেখেতসকলে চেঞ্চিটিভিটি নাথাকে।
হয়
তেখেতসকলে চিকুটিলেও বা হেৰি কৰিলেও গম নাপায়, কিন্তু একেই মানুহ আমাৰ নিচিনাই, খালি মনটো বেলেগ হৈ আছে তেখেতসকলৰ।
আমি যিসকলক মোৰ যিটো আণ্ডাৰষ্টেণ্ডিং, আমি যিসকলক এবনৰ্মেল বুলি কওঁ,
হয়
তেওঁলোকৰ কি হৈছে, তেওঁলোকৰ আউটৱাৰ্ড কনচিয়াছনেছটো পাৰভাৰ্টেড হৈছে, অথচ
ঠিক কৈছে।
ইনাৰ কনচিয়াছনেছটো অপেন হোৱা নাই। ইনাৰ
হয় আপুনি
কনচিয়াছনেছটো অপেন হোৱা নাই আৰু
হয়
আউটৱাৰ্ড কনচিয়াছনেছটোত পাৰভাৰ্চন হয়।
আচ্ছা
বিকজ অফ মেনি থিংছ।
পাৰভাৰ্চন ধুনীয়া শব্দ এটা। হয় আচলতে জীৱনক শিকিবলৈ আচলতে আপুনি এই ছেশ্যনবোৰ এটেণ্ড কৰাটো খুব বাধ্যতামূলক আছিলে। আমি নিজক কণ্ট্ৰল কৰিবৰ কাৰণে। এতিয়া আপুনি যিখিনি ডিজায়াৰৰ কথা ক'লে,
হয়
হিউমেন ডিজায়াৰ আচলতে বিভিন্ন ক্ষেত্ৰত হয়। গতিকে প্ৰপাৰ্টিৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত হ'ব পাৰে, নিজৰ এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত হ'ব পাৰে ধৰক। গতিকে এইবোৰ
এই যে
আচলতে
প্ৰসাদে যিষাৰ বাক্য কৈ থৈ গৈছে, আমি তাক
একজেক্টলি আপুনি জেগাই ইমান ধুনীয়া ৰিলেভেণ্ট হেৰি দিছে। শংকৰদেৱৰ কথাও কৈছে,
হয়
জ্যোতিপ্ৰসাদৰ
হয়
কথাও কৈ আছে।
হয়
আৰু এটা ধুনীয়া শব্দ ক'লে, এইটো অলপ আগতে এটা ক'লে যে আমাৰ অসমীয়া ধুনীয়া শব্দ এটা আছে বুলি ক'লে, আমি কি
ধাউতি।
ধাউতি। মোৰ দেউতাই কৈ থাকে ধাউতিৰ কথাটো। ধাউতি শব্দটো আপোনাৰ মুখত
ইয়াৰ্নিং।
কেতিয়াবা কাৰণে শুনিছো।
ইয়াৰ্নিঙৰ মানে প্ৰপাৰ
ইয়াৰ্নিং
অসমীয়া ৱৰ্ড হ'ল
ইমান
ধাউতি।
প্ৰপাৰ
ব্ৰিলিয়েণ্ট ৱৰ্ড,
ধাউতি থাকিব লাগে,
ব্ৰিলিয়েণ্ট
একদম
ৱৰ্ড।
ধুনীয়া শব্দ। খুব ভাল লাগিছে আপুনি বোলে।
থেংক
থেংক ইউ ছ' মাচ। একদম এক্সট্ৰিমলি চৰি, মই ব্যস্ততাৰ কাৰণে পৰা নাই এটেণ্ড কৰিব।
ঠিক আছে,
আৰু
হয়, কথা নাই।
যেতিয়াই পাৰোঁ মই এটেণ্ড কৰিম।
হয়,
হয়, এটেণ্ড কৰিম আৰু মই পৰাপক্ষত মিছ নকৰিবলৈ চেষ্টা কৰিম। থেংক ইউ ছ' মাচ।
আৰু কোনোবাই কৰিব আলোচনা? So, Animan Sharma, perhaps we can conclude.
Yes, sir. As we have reached the end of today's session, I would like to take this opportunity to thank respected resource person, Sri Diganta Biswa Sarma, sir, for conducting this session. Thank you, sir, for your words of insight. I would also like to thank all the esteemed participants for participating in today's session. Finally, I would like to thank the technical team for making today's session a success. We look forward to the next session. Thank you once again. Good night.
Thank you and namaskar to all.
Thank you.
নমস্কাৰ, গুড নাইট।
Thank you.